like to think of all yeast doughs as kind of being on a spectrum of between baguettes and brioche. So on the baguette side of the spectrum, we have lean doughs that are just water, flour, salt, yeast. They have no fat in them. They are very chewy texture breads. So something like a baguette, a ciabatta, or a bagel would fall in that lean dough category. And then on the very other far end of the spectrum, we have enriched doughs that are made with enriching ingredients like milk, eggs, butter, sugar, other types of fat like shortening or oil. And we always kind of talk about brioche as being kind of like the king of the enriched doughs. Other doughs that would fall in that category would be like a croissant dough or a challah bread. It's not quite as enriched as a brioche, but it's still pretty heavily enriched dough. And when we add those types of ingredients to the bread, it's going to make a much fluffier texture, a much more tender texture to our dough. And then there's a lot of space in between those two ends of that spectrum. A lot of things are just going to kind of fall somewhere in the middle, closer to one end or the other. And I would still consider pizza dough as being in the lean dough side of that spectrum. There are a lot of pizza doughs that do have a little bit of fat in them. It's very common for a pizza dough to be water, flour, salt, yeast, and then a little bit of olive oil. But that amount of olive oil is very small percentage. It's not so much that it's really pushing it into the enriched dough category. And that's not all pizzas. A lot of pizza, like Neapolitan style pizza, is just water, flour, salt, yeast. If you're making it the real authentic way, it has no fat in it at all. And probably the most heavily enriched pizza dough I have seen is the Chicago style deep dish pizza. We make that at our cooking school. And it has like a decent amount of butter in it compared to other pizza doughs, compared to the amount of fat that are in other pizza doughs. But it's still like, I think it's a 0.5% when you're looking at baker's percentages. And so 0.5% is not very much at all. And it's just still in that lean dough category. And we're really talking about the fat that is actually in the mix of the dough, that's actually being incorporated into the dough. The fat that's involved in the other parts of the process really isn't considered when we're thinking about if this is a lean dough or an enriched dough. Like focaccia is kind of an interesting one, because if you've ever seen somebody make focaccia, or if you've ever made focaccia, there is a ton of oil that is involved in the process. You're going to use a lot of olive oil, but most of that oil is on the outside of the dough. It's in the pan, it's being coated on the outside of the dough. We're not actually incorporating most of that oil into the dough. There is some in the dough, but I would still consider a focaccia dough in the lean dough category. When you think about the texture of the final product of a focaccia, it still very much has that lean dough quality. It's not as chewy as a baguette, but it's still on that end of the spectrum. If you think about like the texture of a cinnamon roll, very, very different than like the texture of a focaccia. I hope that makes sense.